first session, we will have a keynote address by Ingrid Betancourt, and that will be followed by comments and a discussion with Cecilia Wikström and Rüdiger Noll. And I will not give very long introductions to the speakers and the commentators, and of course Ingrid Betancourt is well known for her extreme experience and her testimony of that in her book about her life as a hostage or a prisoner of the guerrillas in Colombia for 6 years in the early part of this millennium. And she is also devoting much time and reflection on the role of spirituality and reconciliation as part of processes and experiences of this and the post-hostage or post-crisis life that she is now living. And we are, of course, extremely honored and happy to have her here, and grateful to have her here. And we also grateful to the organizers for being able to bring her here. And we will listen to Ingrid Betancourt for about half an hour, and then I will invite the commentators to come up. I will sit down here. The idea was that Ingrid would stay here at this table, and I will see how it works then with the mic. You have a better mic, part of your equipment, and when you come up here, and we'll hope it works out. So most welcome to this session, and please.
Well, thank you first of all for being here with me today. I would like to make a special saying thanks to the Sigtuna Foundation who made it possible for me to come and who gave me the incredible opportunity of witnessing the first part of this journey, of this dialogue with incredible people that triggered some reflections that I will try to also include in my conference today to be able to share them with you. First, perhaps what I would like to first pinpoint is something that we all know, which is that probably today we see much more the damage of religion as a foster of conflict than what we see as religious actors or religion or peacemaking through religion or with religion. And I think, well, it's obvious why there is no visibility on this kind of peace-building processes. But I would like to share with you 3 cases that has struck me as special in order for us later on to debate on what can be the importance of religion when we try to solve conflicts, where there are religious conflicts or not. The first thing perhaps I would like to share with you sort of a definition, which is this, what are we going to consider as religious bodies acting as peace makers or peace actors? Well, we will consider that religious peacemakers are religious individuals or representatives of faith-based organizations that attempt to help resolve conflicts and build peace. So we're not only going to see individuals acting per se, following their faith, but organizations that can also act in peace-building processes. The first one that I would like to bring to you is a process that began in Cambodia in 1992. You know that Cambodia was under the dictatorship of Pol Pot. And Pol Pot was a man that had been educated in France. So he had this kind of influence of the French Revolution. He was also very enticed by the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Revolution. And what he tried to do in Cambodia was to create a new person and a new society. But his concept of new was really extreme. I mean, everything had to be new. New was that he had to erase the remainings of Western culture that he thought was brought by the elite of Cambodia. He wanted to erase the folk tradition as he thought it was kind of superstition of the peasants in Cambodia, and he wanted to erase Buddhism. The result of this policy, we all know, is 1.5 million people displaced or assassinated in very dire conditions, in concentration camps, people that were starving to death, obliged to work until death, etc. In 78 and 79, the Vietnamese army invaded Cambodia. It was the end of the government of Pol Pot. And the problem then began to be how to reconstruct the country when everything was destroyed. Human relations were destroyed, society was destroyed, economics didn't exist. And there is this case of a Buddhist monk, Maha Gozananda, he had fled Cambodia in the moment of the Red Khmer, and he was living in Thailand. And by the upcoming of the Vietnamese army, lots of people from Cambodia crossed the border to Thailand in order to seek refuge. And from 78 to 92, this man will devote his life in bringing comfort to these refugees. And he will, as a Buddhist, try to understand what was his place at that time, at that moment, in trying to rebuild the relationship between all those human beings that were fleeing, that had lost it all. But afterwards, in 92, he did something that was kind of a remarkable experience. He launched the Diametra, which was a walk that he would do every year during 45 days. The rest of the year would be devoted to prayer and meditation. But during those days, he would walk into Cambodia from little village to little village. And he would try to bring his teachings, but also care for the sick and comfort people. This was an incredible experience of rebuilding a national identity. First, because of course he was a Buddhist, and then bringing again, building bridges between those who had been banned from experience any religion or religious thought, and rekindling this spirituality was of course very important, not only for themselves as individuals, but also to be able to link with those other Cambodians too, that were in the side of Pol Pot, and that remained in the country, because the country, even though there were, Pol Pot was not there anymore, the country still divided. And he would express or explain his endeavor, saying that step by step they had to build peace. And he was accompanied with people that began to follow him, monks, but also lay people. And it was a healing, a physical healing march that went all around Cambodia, trying to bring comfort to people, not only in the physical needs that they were, of course, demanding, but also the moral sickness that they would have as wounds of this horrible conflict, wounds not only of being victims, for those who had been victims in the camps, but wounds of having been in the side of the torturers, when it was people that had belonged to the party of Pol Pot. So he was in that march addressing the two sides of the problem, not only in a physical way, in a moral way, but also in a spiritual way. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, this example. I will refer to another one later. But this is just a hint or an introduction for what I think is the fundamental reason why first you are here and why we are interested in this thing, is what religion is. I mean, religion is not an institution or a compound of dogmas. Religion is the answer to fundamental quests that we have as human beings. And we have them no matter where we come from and no matter what our experiences life is. Of course, religion becomes of the essence in extreme situations. Extreme poverty, extreme cruelty, extreme sickness, extreme pain. That's when the question is the most urgent, and the response can come only through a spiritual reflection. So we have this example of Cambodia. There is another one that I think is interesting for us to consider, which is what happened in Mozambique. In a moment in the story of Mozambique where the leftist government had to face a rebel upheaval of an organization that declared themselves to be anti-communists and that were struggling against the government. It became a very crude and bloodshed conflict. People killing each other, each one of them in each part of this conflict believing that they had the truth and that they were fighting for the good reasons. But it came to a point where the good reasons were not even valid anymore because of the disaster, of the casualties it was inflicting to the population. So there was a need of getting to talk. But how can you talk to people that you hate? Or how can you talk to people that have inflicted on you cruelty, or that have been to you the assassins or murderers of your family? How do you begin with addressing people that you don't want even to consider as people, or as having any right to talk to you? In this endeavor, there was an organization that at that time had no experience in peacemaking. It was an organization of Catholic lay people that actually were focused on charity work. And what they wanted to do was to work on poverty in the urban areas in Italy. The group was called, or is called, it's a very successful group today, Sant'Egidio. And the foundation of Sant'Egidio is today a very important foundation. They have 50,000 members. They are present in 17 countries. But this first story of Sant'Egidio is quite interesting because they arrived in a country they didn't know. They were called by the bishop of Beira in Mozambique, that had been in Rome during his studies as a priest, that had been in touch with Sant'Egidio. And when there was nobody to put anybody to talk together, Monsignor Jaime Gonzalez, thought that why not these guys? And why not these guys? Basically because they had no connection with anything. They were neutral. They were not seen as having any hidden political or economical agenda. And also because of their religious faith, that was the reason of them being an organization. They had what I think is very important, which is moral authority. In a way, the parties that were confronting each other, the Renamo and the government of Mozambique, thought that these guys, if they were or wanting or accepting to participate in the talks, was because they wanted the civil war to end. And that was all. They didn't want to evangelize anyone, they didn't want to change anything, they just wanted to have the conflict brought to an end. The reason of the success of Sant'Egidio, in this case, 1992, Mozambique, was first because of the neutrality they were showing. It was also because with their involvement, the government of Mozambique, if finally accepting to be seated with the leaders of the Renamo, was not having the impression that because Sant'Egidio had no official, let's say, mandate, the government didn't think that it was like recognizing the Renamo as a conflict, in legal terms, like an actor in the conflict. And that was very important because in conflict matters, those subtleties that as human we say, well, who cares? Well, when you are in a country, those things are essential because rights derived from accepting a group as a armed conflict organization or not. So because of this kind of genuine easiness in bringing the process and bringing the parts to talk together, they not only brought them to sit together and to talk, but they achieved a peace process and a deal, a peace deal. This is interesting because Sant'Egidio was a faith-based organization that was interacting or influencing a conflict that was not religious. And the reason why they were accepted was because they were religious, which in a way brings us to the point of reflection where I would like you to be with me, which is religion, because it brings all the essential reflections of mankind, are today, I would say, one of the most important actors that we can use, not always used, but that we can use in peace building and in all the stages of peace building. And this is a reflection that brings me to talk to you about the Colombian process. You know that in Colombia, we have been for nearly 60 years in a very dire and bloody conflict. The numbers are always under a question mark, but we think that more than 200,000 people have died because of the conflict, if not more. It is a conflict that is economic and social, but it is a conflict that has some specificities. In 1968, the Catholic Church launched in Medellin, Colombia, a meeting in which all the bishops of the continent of Latin America gathered and reflected on what was the responsibility of the Catholic Church in the present and future of the continent, especially taking into account the extreme differences between the enormous number of poor people and the little number of very rich people that wouldn't distribute the wealth in Latin America. In a way, it was, let's say, like the yin and the yang. It was exactly the opposite as what could have happened in Europe, in the Eastern countries, under communist rule. Here it was the savage capitalism rule, which at the end of the day, it was oppression, lack of freedom, negation of humanity, of the quality of being human to people that are completely dispossessed. It happened in Colombia and in other places in Latin America that this created a division in the Catholic Church between a hierarchy that was part of the establishment and the young priests that were condemning this kind of way the Catholic hierarchy had to bless the social order as it was. And some priests in Colombia decided to leave priesthood and to embrace the subversion and to become rebels and guerrilleros. Probably because of that, and because of other factors, the component of the religious thought has always been present in the Colombian conflict, even though it is not a religious conflict. But it has forced people, and especially the Catholic hierarchy and the Church, to try to reflect on how to address this problem. And curiously enough, in these 60 years of conflict in Colombia, the Church has been the only institution that has been all the time present in the different moments where an attempt of negotiation has been trying to get into shape. We had a first attempt of negotiation in the years 80. It didn't succeed. Then we had another attempt in the late 90s with a new constitution that was drawn to allow guerrilleros to come into the political life in Colombia. Part of them came to participate in the political life, but the main guerrilla, the FARC, stayed out. Then we had several attempts to bring them again to negotiation. And the last attempt is the one we're living right now. And today, there is a peace process that is in place. The rebels of the guerrilla, which, by the way, some of them were the same that abducted me, are today seated in negotiating with the government for a peace process. During all these years, it was the Catholic Church that was there trying not only to have a record of what was going on while the different governments were changing, but also trying to maintain a kind of connection with the rebels and always to include them in some kind of participation of reflection. And I think they were successful. You see, one of the things that I truly believe in is that when you are confronted with terrorist groups, one of the most trendful positions nowadays is to say we don't talk with terrorists because they're evil, they're terrorists. Well, my position is that you should always talk, no matter what, for two reasons. The first reason is that the guys that were evil yesterday probably won't be evil tomorrow. I remember when I was abducted, I would hear, well, I heard this for 7 years, that the government of Colombia couldn't talk with the guerrilleros because they were abducting people. In the meanwhile, we were staying abducted. Today, they're talking to those same people. I mean, if we could have taken the decision to talk to the guerrilleros before in the same way we're doing now, we would have saved lots of lives of people that died during the 7 years of conflict. So one of the things that I would say is that we always have to have the perspective of change. And it's truly a religious perspective. Understanding change as hope. Hope is our ability to project ourselves in the future, thinking that whatever happens, because we know there is something that transcends what we are here in our time and in our space, we will have many, many chances to go to the right direction if we stay walking. And here I would like to just go back to what the Cambodian monk was saying, which is step by step we get to peace. This is something that is so true, not only in international conflicts, but in our day-to-day life, in the way we relate in our families, in the conflicts that we can have with the people we love. We always think it's impossible, he will never change, she will never change. Well, step by step. We are beings that cannot have transformations, thorough transformations, from the night to the day. It is always a process that begins with a decision, a rational decision. And that rational decision becomes emotional. But for that process of rational to emotional to be able to succeed, we're people that need time. So I think that in that sense, the experience in Colombia was that it was important to talk, no matter what, because we hope, because we know that by talking to someone else, even if we don't agree or even if we don't want to talk to that person because we think that there's nothing we can talk about with that person, well, dialogue is never neutral. You think that you will never change, and it has happened to all of us, that we come into a discussion thinking we are not going to change our position because we are in the right position. And by talking to that other person, suddenly we begin to think, ooh, well, I hadn't seen that. Well, perhaps it's not that important. Perhaps. The thing is that dialogue, relationship, is the proper of human beings, and it's our tool for change. We cannot give up that immense tool for change that we have. So that's one of the reasons why we have to talk. The other is because at the same time we are embracing a dialogue and we are listening to the other, well, the other is also listening to us. So it's a double movement. We change, but the other one changes. And it's very important in any peacemaking process to understand, I would say, the spiritual components of the situation. It's not only about the objective elements, economic, social, the personal history of the persons involved in a quest, in a dialogue. It's also the need that we have to be taken into account as human beings, the need that we have to get into communication. So when I was preparing this point to share with you today, I was thinking that one of the things I wanted to share with you is probably that because we, in the Western world, we are some kind of afraid of religion. We're a little bit skeptical, and we think, well, that's a private thing. Nobody should mess with my ongoing relationship with God. Well, I think that one of the things that we have to begin introducing in our thought is that a relationship with God, and of course this is very Christian, but it's truly what I think, it's a Trinitarian relation. It's always about three. It's about you, the other, and God. It's always in the other that you will find the responses to the questions that you are asking for yourself and that you cannot respond alone. After my release, there was something that happened that was for me an enlightening experience. In the previous months to my rescue, I had been under a very stressful situation triggered by the commander of the camp where we were at, that basically, in a way, was very negative about who I was. In a way, I represented for him all the bad. I was a politician. I was a Colombian, but not really a Colombian because I was also French, so I was, by definition, a traitor. And I was a woman. And women are like witches. They can manipulate you, so they're dangerous. And I'm just being very schematic, but it's because I would like to enter after in other points. Anyway, this person that I had in front of me was truly an enemy for objective reasons and for personal reasons too. When I had any kind of relationship with him, that we talked or anything, it was always very stressful for me because he was very rude and he was more than rude. I would say that he had a pleasure in torturing people. It was a sadistic kind of behavior. And in my thought, when I would think alone of my feelings to this person, I would think, I hate him. It's bigger than me. I hate this person. Until the day I realized that the hatred in me was a chain. At that time I was chained to a tree. It was really very painful. I mean, when you are, where physically you are treated like an animal, it becomes something that you have to really search inside of you to try to cope with the situation in order not to damage your soul, your identity, your respect for yourself. So it was very difficult. And when I realized the reaction I had against this man, I realized that it was a chain, another chain that I was putting on myself, because he didn't care that I hated him or not. But I was poisoning myself with this negative feeling of wanting all the bad for this guy that was doing all the bad to me. The case is that when I was rescued, the scene, I relive this scene sometimes, and I'm going to share it with you. We had been told that there was a European Commission that was going to come and talk with the prisoners. And they were supposed to land in a helicopter, and we would have a chat with these guys, and that was all. The helicopter landed. We were surrounded by 200 guerrilleros, and we were 15 prisoners. Armed guns all over the place, and we were, of course, we were prisoners. When the helicopter landed, it landed in a coca field. So it was an open space in the jungle. All the rest were very, very concentrated, very dense jungle. But there was the space where the helicopter could land. And the guys, or the crew, or the team that came out from that helicopter, there was a woman, and there were 5 or 6 guys. When I saw them, I thought, well, these are not European people. I could be mistaken, but it's not European. And when they began talking, they had not the accent you expect from people from Europe. That, of course, if it's a second language, you know the accent that we all have when we speak a foreign language. And I thought, these guys are the same guys. These guys are from the FARC. They are disguised into something. There is a plot to use us. And the only thing that I could think of was probably they're going to videotape us, and they will show to the world that we are healthy and that we are okay, in order to just continue in the abduction for who knows how many more years. And what I was thinking, all my companions were thinking. So the 15 of us, we were struggling not to talk to them or not to have any communication with them until the moment they said that we had to board the helicopter. And none of us wanted to board the helicopter. So at the end we had no choice, right? Because they were armed and we were not. So they handcuffed us and they obliged us to get into the helicopter with 2 of their commanders. 2 commanders of the guerrilla. This guy I was talking to you, or telling you about, Enrique, who was a very sadistic type of commander, and another one, Caesar, who was a higher level of commander that was there for the operation. So both boarded the helicopter with us. The helicopter took altitude, and suddenly there was this fight inside the helicopter. But what you have to understand is that for us, we didn't understand what was happening. For us, it was FARC fighting FARC. We didn't see who was fighting whom. And it's incredible because of course we could have, I mean, it was kind of obvious now that I think of it, that it was really a rescue operation. But we were so mentally distressed that we couldn't even think that we were living right there was our liberation. We couldn't even think that it was for us. So when suddenly one of the guys, perhaps the biggest of the bunch, shouted in a very, very loud voice, because we were in the helicopter, so the engines and the noise, but he shouted and we all heard, "We are the Colombian army, you are free." This was a shock. And I remember screaming like I've never screamed in my life, and I hope I will never again. Because it was a scream that I could not control. It was not me screaming. It was another me taking the stage of my own body and delivering a scream that was a huge scream. And when I was hearing myself in that situation, I was thinking, well, I have to stop this. I mean, this is insane. But when I looked around me, I could see that all my other fellow hostages were screaming like me. We were gone bonkers. We were completely insane. But what happened with that scream, and that's something that I profoundly noticed, is that all the anger left. With the joy of the liberation and the expectancy and the hope of seeing again my family and recovering my life, suddenly everything turned to another level. And this guy, which was that monster, that commander that had put us in so much pain, he became a little poor man that had been beaten by other men and that was neutralized on the floor and that was continue being beaten. And I remember saying to the others, come on, stop. We cannot behave like that. And I think that that is something that only comes if you, I mean, the reflection of what happened, which I think happened to all of us, had stopped there. It's a relief. We are joyful. We feel so glad that even we don't care about the guy who's there. But it had to go a step beyond, which is, yes, I care for the guy who's there. Because 7 years before I was there, just the fate turned. He was free, I was abducted. Now he's a prisoner, I'm the free person. So of course I care about him because I know what is happening in his mind. I know the distress that he's feeling. And I tell you this because I really believe that that's why we need to have spiritual input in what we consider to be just mechanical matters of politics. We cannot secure reconciliation in a country if we don't help the people individually, and because it's an individual process, then it's a collective process, to go beyond the experience and the trauma, and to transform that experience and that trauma into something that is positive for all. By the way, the first person that benefits from forgiveness is the forgiver. And in a way, we could say that forgiveness is a very selfish thing. Because truly forgiveness is not something that you grant to the other like a favor you do in your mercy. That's not how it works. The other one is not affected by your feelings. You are the only one affected by the fact that you don't forgive. So it's important to forgive first, because it's something it's very individual, it's very personal, it's very spiritual, but it's also something that links us to the others. And this is something that we that we need to process. Whatever we feel, whatever words we convey, affect the others. We are not neutral to the others are not neutral to us. Sometimes we're thinking something, somebody comes, makes a little speech, and we think, oh, I changed my mind. That happens all the time. That's what human being is. It's being a relational being. That's the importance of who we are. That's why freedom is important. That's why dignity is important. Dignity is not a concept of me and myself. Dignity is a concept of me in the midst of the others, in how I relate to the others. And if I claim dignity for myself, then I have to grant dignity to the others. Which brings me to the last point I would like to make with you today before we open the floor to discussion, which is there is a conflict inside the conflict. In all humans today, and I think this is the next step we have to just go forward. There is a conflict in humanity that is an inner conflict that is present in all conflicts, and it's a gender conflict. We have done a lot to bring women in equality with men. And that's not a concession for women. It is something very much important for men. Because if we are relational beings, man needs to have his equal in front of him, looking at his eyes. And that equal, because it's his equal, deserves to be loved. And because it is an equal being, then it is rewarding to be loved by that being. Whenever we found relationship where the man doesn't grant equality to the woman, we have problems. And it's a problem for women too, because we are the ones bringing our children. And we need to convey a profound reflection of what human being is. Human being is not being a man or not being a woman. It's being together. Men and women together. That's what makes us human beings. And this is a point that is very much related, one, with conflict. Because as you know, women live the conflict always in a different way. There is a UN Security Council resolution, number 1325, that I recommend you just have a glance at it, which talks about the fact that women are raped. Women are subject to abuse in a conflict situation in different ways that men are. And this abuse, or this particular situation where women are, affects the possibility of reconciliation. Because men do the war, mainly, but women do the reconciliation, mainly. We need to give to women the possibility to heal, to reconciliate, to forgive, in order to pass that inheritance to the next generations. So if you see in this reflection on religion, on conflict, and on human being, on how to resolve those conflicts through religion, this issue of gender is something that we have to look a little bit with more precision. Said that, I thank you for having listened to me, and
very much, Ingrid Betancourt, for this very broad and emotionally very strong message, starting with the cases in Cambodia, Mozambique, Colombia, broadening it to the spiritual aspects and to the gender equality aspects. And I think there are many fruitful thoughts and impressions. We have two commentators who are being invited for this role, as I mentioned, and I will ask them to come up and sit here. I guess we better solve it that way. There are microphones there, and maybe we'll be able to reach out with microphones. We have Cecilia Wikström, who is in the midst of a campaign to be re-elected to the European Parliament, so we will have to have a certain distance listening to her comments and trying to dilute them from any kind of partisan message if there is. Cecilia is also a minister in the Church of Sweden, and you have also served in the Swedish Parliament, and you are one of the more visible members of the European Parliament, and also especially on human rights issues, and I'm sure you will bring up perhaps cases from issues where you have shown your specific commitment. And
can I just say, I'm basically taking a break from the campaign this moment, so don't even consider me a politician at this moment.
But I think we need that experience for the discussion.
Is it possible for you to stand up? We can't see nothing.
Let's do that.
We'll see how we can.
Absolutely.
We'll see how we can deal with this also for the coming session. And then we have Rüdiger Noll, who has worked with the European Conference of Churches on issues of church and society, and now are active in related issues in the German context. And maybe I would ask you too, if you have a couple of spontaneous reactions and comments to the presentation, and then maybe I will bring up a couple of issues if you don't do that yourself. Will I ask Cecilia to start out with, and maybe we should stand up?
Should we stand? Is that more comfortable for you? Okay. Well, the first reflection is, of course, wholeheartedly thank you to you sharing your experiences with us. And the second point is that courage begins with one voice. It is that simple. And thirdly, that we all become what we are, what we're meant to be, through dialogue. I become myself through you, and you become yourself through me, if we really participate and share in a true and genuine dialogue. And this is what I think is the essence of what you have just conveyed to us, a message of hope. And hope can anticipate reconciliation. Being where you started, your point of departure, as I understood it, is that religious people participating in a dialogue are anticipating reconciliation and hope and liberation. But it takes a lot of courage. And it also demands from us to take ourselves seriously. If you really enter into a true and genuine dialogue and not a monologue. I think I'll stop for the moment.
Really? Which microphone do you have?
Oh, you should have taken, yes, exactly, you take in this. I hope
Can you
Yeah.
hear me through this microphone? Yeah, I just wanted to say wholeheartedly thank you for your presentation. I think you have made it very, very clear that religion is part of our identity. And it is not a private matter, it leads us to the other, it has a potential for transformation. From a European perspective, I've made that experience when there was this transition period in the GDR, where the churches opened their gates. And this is where the demonstration started, where all of a sudden there was a safe haven, where the church was ready to take a risk and was saying, this can be a home for you, start here. And it had this, as you emphasized, this spiritual message, to say non-violence was a message from the start. So it was demonstrations with candles. But let me also respond as a European to you. And you said it at one stage very clear, religion is not an institution. I'm afraid in our kind of secularized setting in Europe, religion is also sometimes an institution, which either tries to cope with a secularized setting and makes its voice heard, but also, well, in context, basically I'm thinking of Central and Eastern Europe, where religion plays a dominant role. They're trying to avoid to get into this situation of secularization. And that brings us sometimes in competition, and also makes us not, as churches, the peace advocates we should be. Here I'm thinking that I've been involved in the conflict in former Yugoslavia. Drawing consequences from this and perhaps challenging two aspects of what you have said. If you look at these examples which you have given us, it was, to a certain extent, outstanding figures, personalities who drove the conflict. Looking in the situation of former Yugoslavia, I believe what is important if we talk about conflicts, that we involve the people in this. And it cannot just be a matter of church leaders. In former Yugoslavia, we have seen church leaders coming together saying, we are all for peace. When the next conflict came, the next elections came, they all went back into their camps. So I think we need an approach where we have not only an interreligious dialogue, but also an intra-religious dialogue which takes the people on our way. The second point I wanted to make is, we look on conflict situations, you emphasize conflicts, actual conflicts, and reconciliation and healing processes afterwards. I have learned, I hope, in this Yugoslavian conflict, former Yugoslavian conflict, I would want to emphasize preemptive measurements, interreligious dialogue. A friend of mine in the World Council of Churches, Wesley Arayaraja, always used to say, interreligious dialogue is not an ambulance. It's a long-term healthcare system. As soon as the conflict is there, you kind of have hardly a platform to talk to each other. But let's work on this healthcare system. And I'm saying this also in this meeting because I believe we need to invest much more in some of the initiatives we will hear about tomorrow about non-violence training. Thinking theologically, where is the place of the other in my theology and my life? And it is very difficult with governments, but also with some church agencies, to find resources for this preemptive way of working on conflicts.
We have several mics, and of course you should. You're still and you left your head. Okay. You are in the same situation. I think that would be.
No, just a comment. I think that.
Oh yes, it's on.
Okay.
It's on.
Like this? Okay. It's about the involvement of church leaders. I agree with you that everybody has to be included. The problem is that today, I mean, the others are there. In a different way. The parties are there, the social organizations are there, the economical powers are there. Normally, when we talk about a peace process, you have those agents that are naturally drawn to participate in the peace talks. But religious leaders tend to miss, I would say, the capacity they have to convoke, to mobilize, and to speak in a way that others cannot. And this is because sometimes we feel as a nation, as a group of people that are divided into cooperative interests. So you will have the landlords, for example in Colombia, you will have the landlords, you will have the industrials, you will have the politics, you will have the women, perhaps. Well, actually, let's say, I mean, this is something that has to be worked on in Colombia. There's no women participating in the peace talk today. I mean, there are some of the guerrilla, like in a second, I believe there was one invited by the government, but I haven't seen her in the platform, so. So the issue is, and I think it's what I think we should reflect on, is religious leaders tend not only to diminish their importance locally, as in their capacity to be the shepherds of a community, but also they tend to forget that they are part of a transnational community. And that is very important, because there are things that can be used, leverage, support ideas from people that have the same beliefs, but that they're not locally immersed in the conflict. So that was the parenthesis I wanted to make, because that's the feeling I was having when I was trying to make this lecture. I was in a way conscious that the others are there, for good or for bad, but in a way they are there. And the problem is that sometimes that input of spirituality, that it is credible in religious leaders. It's not credible in politicians. It's not credible in economic leaders. It's a factor that we need to bring into the table.
I was happy that you started out by giving the Cambodian example from 1992 with the monk that people would follow. 10 years later, in 2012, I was happy to travel to Cambodia to work with one of these women, Mu Sukua, who is really fighting to encourage people to form a civil society that is sustainable. And that means empowering women. And we traveled through the jungle on small streets to gather and collect women. We were talking together about capacity building, about dialogue, how important it is to form a civil society that can be inspired, as you mentioned, by religious leaders, and also how important spirituality is for credibility and for sustainability of these organizations. It came into your mind during your speech that another important woman, Marian Wright Edelman, she used to say, if you cannot keep running for democracy, for equal rights, then walk. And when you're tired of walking, crawl. If you cannot even crawl for democracy, for human rights, and your fight for that, just keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And I think that's what we are all here for, to encourage each other, to participate in a true dialogue, and to build upon our mutual obligation to encourage each other and to form a civil society that can prevail through days of easy days and more difficult days, in crisis and even in war. At this moment, we have one European that is imprisoned like you were in prison. He has been in Eritrean jail for 13 years, more than 13 years. His name is David Isaac. This spring, we managed to bring together actors and actresses from Hollywood together with politicians in the European Parliament to put up a play and to use culture as a soft power to shed light upon the fact when everything has been, preempted. People have been demonstrating, protesting, writing, politicians have encouraged each other and fought each other, to tell you the truth. But he's still in prison. So now we need to take a complete different angle on this. And culture is a soft power. We have tried that, and in a few days you will see even more of that. Maybe even today, I think. So keep looking. But we need to also show solidarity with the fellow Europeans that are in prison since more than 13 years. So there are similarities between you and your days and your suffering. and another fellow European. And we must never give up. We have an obligation, all of us, to anticipate the day when he is liberated. And coming back to your speech, the scream that liberated you, I really wish that it will sound, that we will hear him also being set free. And meanwhile, we have to keep bringing tread upon his destiny up until now. So those were the thoughts that came into my mind, but also that we must speak up on those really difficult conflicts in the world, where at this moment Christians are being subjected to ethnical cleansing in parts of the world, and I'm talking about Iraq, of course, where Christians are fleeing day by day for the pure reason that they are Christians. So there is religious persecution in the world, and we should stand up and defend them. I think that is a moral obligation, not only for church leaders, but to all of us.
May I add a perspective to this? In one way, you now mentioned the soft power. Otherwise, we haven't used the word power that much. If I wanted to be the kind of problematic moderator, I could say that Ingrid's cases were primarily relating to post-conflict situations. I mean, it was Cambodia after after Pol Pot, and although it was a long process, I have the feeling that the Mozambique case was also relating to the fact that Renamo was on the way back and with the lack of support from South Africa. And your own experience of Colombia is also when the guerrillas is weaker. Is this spiritual strength or this emphasis of dialogue, is it relating better to post-conflict situations than when you are in the midst of a power struggle or something like that? How do you be, I mean, I think Rüdiger was kind of alluding a little to that with your references to Yugoslavia. When there is a role in conflict prevention and there is a role in post-conflict peace building, but what is the role in the midst of a violent conflict? Do you want to pick up on that?
First of all, I would definitely not say it is easier to get engaged in healing and reconciliation as you have described it than in preemptive measurements. But the question here is, in how far are we part of what is happening in a society, in our media? If I go to the former Yugoslavian conflict, I remember days during the war that I was in Kosovo or in Sarajevo, where there were hundreds and hundreds of TV cameras and everyone wanted to speak to you. A month later they were gone, it was not interesting. And it is much more difficult to interest society or media in emerging conflicts. So this is where I see the difference between preemptive measurements. And I'm saying it's much more difficult to get finances and resources for these type of trainings which we need, which we are doing with type of dialogues which we are doing. Today you hardly get funding for networking. You hardly get funding for trainings. But when there is a conflict there, all of a sudden all governments are ready to push in money, partly with their own interest. So this is where I say it is not methodologically more easy, but I think it is, the question is in how much we as churches listen to our brothers and sisters who engage in emerging conflicts. So this is where I hope the ecumenical movement, the interreligious movement, would much be more listening and a sensor for emerging conflicts than most of our societies and our medias are.
Yeah.
I was thinking perhaps to expand a little on the Colombian experience, because it has been a very long experience of trying to participate in building or just starting a peace process with actors that were adamant in not even talk to each other. And in this reflection, there's something that I think could be useful, which is the idea that, well, first you have to be creative, because every situation is different. When you are in conflict, when people are killing each other, when you hear the sound of the bullets, you have to be creative. And in the case of Colombia, one of the things that I have been just, thinking is that the way to intervene or to try to stop or to try to make a bridge between those two parties that were flying bullets took different wording. I remember at one point they were talking about mediators, so they were trying to mediate. Then they were trying to be guarantors. So for whatever reason they needed to guarantee something that if one delegate of one party was going to meet another delegate of the other party, the church would be there to guarantee that they wouldn't kill each other as they were going to meet each other. There was also, there's another word that has been sounding now, which is accompanying partner. Just because, in a way, they have the authority, the moral authority, so that whatever is said can be recorded in a truthful manner. And there are other ways that can be invented, but I think that the clue here is neutrality and moral authority. And that's an asset that, in a conflict where people hate each other, which is a situation of not trusting the other, this asset is a treasure. Because you need to find that person, that link, that will be able to convoke the other one, and at the same time the enemy of that other one, which, without being accused of serving the interest of one of them. And that is very difficult. So that is, let's say, the gold vein that we need to try to search for.
May I challenge you on that in one, trying to put it to the point of saying, I mean, sometimes we ask the church or a volunteer, good organization, good forces in general, to speak out against injustice and against war and conflict and things, etc., etc. Here we have talked a lot about reconciliation, dialogue, mediation, creating space for contact. Do you see a tension in that? Can you be, I mean, you now mentioned neutrality. Part of moral authority is perhaps that you have spoken out, that you have been the challenging voice. Can the challenging voice also be the mediator in a conflict? That kind of, this is a classic balance from many political discussions, but it would be great to hear some of your reflections on that.
Well, I think it depends on the person itself. I think there is I mean, when I was saying that the church is not an institution, it's because I know it is an institution. I mean, it is an institution, but it's not only an institution. I mean, every time, well, I'm going to go to the extremes, but let's say that Pope Francis is Francis, and he's also Pope. But sometimes he acts as Pope, and sometimes as Francis. And that gives him a freedom of saying things that perhaps other popes wouldn't say, because they wouldn't have this kind of distance with their function, which he created from the first day. He said, "Hello, here I am, Bishop of Rome." He didn't say, "Here I am, the Pope." So in a way, he is always like having those distances. And I think that there are people that can use those distances in a very fruitful way in order to push two parties in the right direction. Sometimes it's a leader of the church that speaks, because he is the archbishop of this town or the other, or because he is the he has a leading role in a church organization for whatever reason. But sometimes it's just a priest that has no let's say, relevance, but it's his personality, and it's how he speaks and what he says. And sometimes it's because he writes in a newspaper, or because he has a TV program, or because, I mean, what I want to say is that we have to use both. We have to use the human capacity of being oneself, but also not to forget that once you are in a position of leadership, it has to be used.
Thank you. Cecilia wants to add something to that, and may I then put it to you? You being one of the voices who speak out very strongly for David Isaacs, would you also be, with that background, have a chance to be part of the negotiations and to really get him liberated? But you want to say something else? But maybe you could
I would not want to disclose to you what's taking place at this moment. Maybe later, but not today.
I would be wise enough not to ask you to do that.
So, but it goes the other way around also. When I've had the most delicate problems in the European Parliament, colleagues from the right, from the left, have told many times, let's give it to the priest to solve. So, that also happens, even in politics. So as long as we are willing to be useful, as long as we put ourselves available for other people, then it doesn't matter if you are the Pope or a politician or a priest or a bishop, archbishop, we can all be used. In other words, if we are open to be used. I think this is the main question. If we dedicate ourselves for serving other people, never to rule other people, but to serve other people, then we can be used personally, individually, as tools. You were mentioning religion as a tool for dialogue and for hope, which is true. But don't underestimate yourselves. You may also be used as tools for bringing hope and reconciliation into this world. And it's a huge task, but I think that we should all subscribe to that task.
We have spoken earlier on to say that if you want to assume or ask to assume a mediation role, part of what you need is credibility. And that means you need to be outspoken of issues like justice, because there is no peace without justice. You need to be outspoken on the concept of community, the question of human rights, human dignity. So I don't see a conflict between a mediator and somebody who's very outspoken on these common issues of our societies. The question is that you are not seen, or your credibility would go down if you would instrumentalize your issues. You cannot speak about human rights in one country and apply the same standards in a different way in another country. So I think if you want to assume the role of mediator, your credibility doesn't depend necessarily on how outspoken or not you are, but on the question that you apply your criteria to the same issues in the same way, and you cover them not only with your attitude, but also with your own behavior.
I will now break the authoritarian format and open up for 3 questions in a row, and then we will have the answers to them, perhaps some final comments for this panel. And I see one hand at least.
First of all, I will say thank you. We really appreciate that you share your experiences with us. And the strongest thing that you presented was when you were free, and this scream that was behind yourself, and the feeling of forgiveness, reconciliation that came over you. So I have a question. Do you think that is something religious in that? Is it something that will stay, or will you be angry in the old way again? So I was very curious about this experience and what it gave to you. Thank you.
Any more hands?
Thank you very much. I would say that if a state like Sweden decided to not make those dangerous weapons, that would be very good. Now we have heard that Schweiz doesn't want our weapons. I hope we can share down that. I think that it would be very good for peace if many of us could share down our weapons.
Now the broadening of the discussion. I have one more question, if anybody. Okay, take one there, and then you have the chance. Okay.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to hear your side of the story. You always receive a lot of different sides of the story, media, etc.
Please put your mic.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, great. I wanted to ask actually, because I've been working with emergency work throughout the world.
Speak into the mic all the time.
Okay, actually, okay, sorry. So I've been working with emergency work and humanitarian situations, disasters, since 2008, and I've been working with the humanitarian department of Church of Sweden as well, in the Philippines, in Haiti, in Libya, etc. And I've found that, and I've always also worked for other organizations who have not been linked to churches. And I've found that it's been, in a way, very useful to be part of a church going out into societies, because many of these societies where there's been a conflict or disaster, it's been a big focus on religion and turning to churches once the disaster is struck. And I found it quite interesting to hear about the moral authority that you speak about, because I also found, for example, in Haiti, I was approached by numerous people in society saying the churches and the pastors have told us it's because of our sins that the earthquake happened, etc. And it's also a matter of thinking of moral authority and what does this mean, and about being humble about your leadership role within the church, because there's so much power to it, speaking about power earlier. So it's more of a comment and a concept of discourse of moral authority. Thank you.
I shorten that and make a question out of it. How does bad religion influence your authority as a church? We had the two other questions about did hatred come back, and then about weapons procurement. And I think we'll give the last word to Ingrid, and so we'll start with Rüdiger, Cecilia, and then finally Ingrid, and that will be the end of it.
Talking about the weapons exports, I have to admit that I'm German and I now belong to the country which is the third strongest in weapons export. But it is the churches in Germany who do a shadow report every year as to where they go, how they go, what are the criteria. And it kind of creates a lot of discussion in society. So this is where I see our churches actually to play a very important and very crucial role in the moral sense. My last comment, if I may, and I don't want to pour water into the wine at the very end of our meeting, because this was meant and is an encouraging meeting for religion to assume its role. But I'm still struck by a book title which I read kind of 20 years ago, and the title was The Ambivalence of the Sacred. So I think in reflecting which positive contributions we can give, we should still reflect on what we are doing in this limbo between our attitude and our normative sentences we can easily say, and what we apply in practice, especially in conflicts which I wouldn't call religious conflict. The special rapporteur, Heiner Bielefeld, just last week gave an interview. Many of the conflicts are not religious conflicts, but they are conflicts in which religion is also misused. And we should not neglect that factor and see how we deal with that within our different religions.
Listen, I couldn't agree more. I have nothing to add to that. There is much more. The concept of religion is actually more of aggressivity, of aggression, of hatred than the opposite. And that is pure misuse of the concept of religion. There are always two sides. And you elaborated so well on that that I have nothing to add really.
And then finally,
I completely agree with that concept of misuse of religion. I mean, I think that's why we're here, because we know that it's so easy to just use religion in a perverted way. But I think we also have I think that we have been under the complex of who we are. I mean, like we are losing our capacity to fight for what we believe. Why? Because we don't want to get into conflict with others that believe differently. Okay? And I think we need to fight for what we believe. I mean, it's part of who we are. And when I say this is because I had the profound feeling that even in those people that will react negatively to what I might say when I fight for the principles and the values I believe in, I am sure that at the end, and it's curious because it was one of the discussions we had this morning, the relation between, for example, human rights and religion, in the sense that human rights out there are seen as could be seen, or sometimes are seen, as a Western imposition, or as a bourgeois concept. Those are things that we hear. It doesn't matter how they are catalogued, but human rights have to be defended. Not only for us, but also for the people that need for us to be vocal, because they are being victims by those who are not embracing those values. So this is my reaction to misuse of religion. Out there is something that in the bottom of our heart and of our consciousness, we know when it's right and when it's wrong. And sometimes we feel it's wrong from other religions, and sometimes it's wrong in our own religion. And in both cases, we have to stand up and say and fight for what we think is right. That's why we have a mouth, and we have a brain, and we have a heart. It's to be able to say genuinely, authentically, what we believe and to fight for that. That was one answer. The other question you were asking about the cry of liberation, which is a cry of forgiveness. I think that the big problem we're facing today in Colombia, and I'm relating it to politics because I want to put it in a different perspective, is that although people have been for 60 years wanting to have peace and begging to have peace, once that the peace is near, then we become like so picky. And then we say, oh, but we want to have peace, but we want them to do this and to do that, and they have to kneel in front of us so that we forgive them, and etc., etc. It's very difficult. It's very difficult once the peace process is started to conclude. Because the desire of peace, which is among everybody, conflicts with the ego of each of us. We want to have peace, but we don't want to. We are right, they are wrong, they have to pay. Having the right balance between reconciliation and impunity, understanding that justice is not revenge, going over our expectations in order to be able to say, well, perhaps I don't have it all, but it's better. Because, well, Perhaps it's not the justice I wanted to achieve, but now I am sure that my grandchildren and children will not face violence. There are choices we have to make. I prefer to see this as a process in which we have all done wrong. We have all contributed to the mess. And we should be very humble in the way we approach a reconciliation process in order to be able to be more generous than greedy, more giving than demanding, and in a way that is also a cry of liberation. A cry of liberation is when we accept that even though if it hurts, we are welcoming, we can welcome the other. The welcoming, the opening the arms. I'm sure we all have had this experience. Somebody has done wrong to us, and we say, doesn't matter, I forgive him, but I will never talk to him again. We do it all the time. The second step on that is, okay, I forgive, it's hard. It's very difficult for me to go beyond my grief. But not only I rationally take the decision of forgive, but I also emotionally embrace the consequence of forgiving, which is welcoming the other back again.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. As you can hear, it's been an encouraging, challenging, and emotional experience listening to you, and we are happy and honored that you wanted to be part of this conference and the days here at Sigtuna. Thanks to Cecilia Wikström, to Rüdiger Noll. We adjourn for coffee, and there will be another session starting just a little after 3 o'clock, and we will have Ingrid and the panel as well later on today.